Hello and welcome back to the It's Only Kids Football podcast. Over the next 6 weeks, we're dropping a special 6-part series in partnership with Little Kickers, completely dedicated to making you the best coach you can be to create a better experience for kids on the pitch. To do this right, we are joined by our expert from Stronger Youth Brands, Laura Mellor-Bachman, Director of Curriculum and Training and an Early Childhood Learning Specialist. In this episode, we're going to look at the philosophy of play. Today, we're breaking down why play-centric learning beats rigid instruction every single time and how it drives cognitive development and emotional safety. Here to help me ask the questions is my co-host and assistant manager, Mike Clark. Let's get into it. Laura, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
It sounds like you're much more of an expert than myself and Mike in just about anything to do with child development and education. But Little Kickers, I briefly know. A lot of people in England will know what Little Kickers is. My son, his sort of first entry into football was Little Kickers. But for anyone who doesn't know, the uninitiated, could you just give us a little bit of a brief explanation of what Little Kickers is?
Sure. It's an introduction to football at a really young age. We're really looking at it as enrichment programming and sports youth programming and just that intro in and making it fun and enjoyable for the youngest of children. So we start at 18 months old. And our sweet spot goes from 18 months up until about age 8, which is usually when they're kind of making those steps into those grassroots teams and things like that.
No, thanks, Laura. That's great. And like I say, Little Kickers was a great entry into football for my eldest. He's 9 now, but for the first few years of being his introduction to the game, it was through Little Kickers. And today, we're going to talk about when a child enters their first sort of contact with football and the philosophy of play, and sort of looking at cognitive development, emotional safety, and why play accelerates learning over rigid instruction. So when we say kids learn through play, what is actually happening in a child's brain compared to when we give them a rigid, structured plan to follow?
Well, I think one of the things that's really important to start with is the idea that how fast children learn at this young age, and especially where we're talking about, especially when you think about that 0 to 3 age range, they're literally building billions of neural connections in a single day. They're born with all these neurons, but they're not all connected. So what does that mean? It means when I look at a ball, if I'm an infant even, if I look at a ball, I'm making connections of, okay, it's round, I can hold it, it has a certain feel and a texture to it. It might be a certain color, but then I'll encounter another ball. Well, it's also round. It has a certain feel and texture, but it's bigger and it's a different color. So I'm building all these neural connections. So it's really important to understand that the youngest of children, they're learning all of this at the same time as they're trying to make sense of the world. And that's really what it comes down to when we're talking about play versus rigid learning is I've got to play with things to make sense of them. I mean, even as adults, you think about, I want to put my hands on things. I want to get dirty with things before I can really understand what it's about. So the more that they're playing and able to manipulate and try new things, even if they don't work, that's how they really understand things. If everything is rigid and a lot of it is directive, they can't figure those things out. They can only figure out what you've given them to figure out. So you think about a great analogy is if someone asked you to fix a car and you've never fixed a car before in your life. And they say, well, here's the manual, fix this car. Well, if I've already played inside a car before and I know where the engine is and I know where these parts are and the belts go and all of that, I can figure that out. But if I read a manual, I have to figure out what is an engine? Where is a belt? What does a belt look like? There's so much more that I have questions about rather than just going in and playing and figuring it out. So that's the idea, is that you have to be able to work with things, play with them, experiment, be curious. That's where true learning comes from. And then you take all of that learning and then you start to manipulate it and make sense of it in ways where you can structure things. But that has to come first.
And Laura, because you mentioned adults still do that. Is that just a continuous thing? It's just happening at almost the most ridiculous type of scale when they're so young, because they're just building all of these neurons constantly, billions of them, as you say. Does that ever change though? Is that learning almost through touch? Does that ever go away?
So it never goes away. We always learn through our 5 senses. That's how every single person takes in the world: touch, taste, smell, hearing. That's how we learn. But how rapid it happens absolutely weans as we get older. That is why, like, there's so much study done in the first 1,000 days of life, because learning is so rapid at that time. Those neural connections are happening so quickly. So that's why we hear like things like children are sponges. I don't really love that analogy, but it speaks to this idea of like the taking in information at such a rapid rate and trying to figure out and sort it and organize it and figure out what to do with it. We still do that as adults, but we've already built so many schemas and neural pathways that it helps us do it a lot faster. It's kind of like if you're in a forest. If you're treading on land through a forest that has never been treaded on before, it's harder to get there. But if I've gone over that path a million times, it's really easy to walk in the forest then. Adults, we've walked on those paths a million times. Children are building all those paths. So while they're building them really fast, there's so many more of them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me. And the thing I was thinking of was at the youngest of ages, when they're building all these neural pathways and they're developing so rapidly, how does playing a sport or just being in that type of environment, how does that accelerate that growth, or does it accelerate that growth even further, or how does it benefit a child by playing a sport or playing football in this case? How does that benefit them?
I don't know if it's like sport versus non-sport, but what I will say is that play and learning, a really famous philosopher, Dewey, would say that learning is social. So the more that we do in a social setting, the better we learn and understand, because we're playing off of one another and we're learning from one another's experience. So even if I didn't experience it, but I watched you experience it, I'm learning something from that too. So I think it's about that social element that really perpetuates learning in a sports environment and taking away a lot of huge benefits in cognitive ability as well as social ability and physical ability. A lot of it comes from that group play situation.
It's interesting we're talking about this right now, because I literally just came out of the garden with my youngest, who's 6, and what I was really struggling with was he wants to fall about while kicking the ball. So like every time he's got the ball, he sort of deliberately falls over when he kicks it. And every part of me is like, it is really annoying me. Like, because I'm thinking, if you do what I tell you to do, you'll be able to kick the ball properly. But he's having fun, and the whole time I'm just battling with this. Like, I'm finding it really frustrating and irritating, but he looks like he's having fun. So I'm literally walking a tightrope the whole time. But to go on to my next question, we talk about emotional safety as a pillar of learning. So what does that mean? And the reason I say that is emotional safety in a sports environment to a kid being able to make those mistakes and be silly without having an overbearing, bald, middle-aged man criticize them constantly for falling over. Is that what when we talk about emotional safety for a kid in a sport environment? Is that what we're talking about?
I think it's a couple things. I think emotional safety in a sports environment, especially if we're talking like little kickers, where a lot of times it's their first experience, we're setting so much foundational work, especially if they're new to the environment. Even if they're older, even if you've got a 10-year-old that's never played before, they've never been on a team before, they're coming in with all of this other stuff that has to be settled first before they can perform. So even if you're talking about an older child, I have to be physically safe and I have to have physical well-being met. This is all like that. At some point, you probably learn like Maslow 101 psychology, hierarchy of needs kind of stuff. They have to have those physical measures met first. They have to be fed. They have to have clothing. They have to be, have shelter and those kind of things, right? Basic. The next piece of the puzzle is that they are secure and they're safe, that there's no danger coming their way, right? So for us as adults, our sense of danger for a child is very different than their sense of danger. So we're thinking about things like them getting burnt, them falling over, they're tripping over the ball outside and they're just going to get hurt now. They're going to choke, they're going to this, they're going to that. That's not how children interpret their safety. Children interpret their safety is mommy near me? Do I know where my safe places are? Do I know who my safe people are? Can I have my lovey with me? Those are the things that make a child feel safe. They don't perceive safety the same way that we do. So when they get onto a pitch and they're coming in for the first time, they've got to reconcile all that stuff in their brain before they can be productive. So it's the same thing with any kind of learning. If you feel like you're at risk, you're not going to learn anything. So I have to have emotional safety there before I can do anything else. Now, to your point, that might also be like in your example, then like there's a maturity thing there too. Like they want to be silly at this age. It's fun. They want to enjoy it. It comes back to that play concept. So sometimes it's just like, I just want to have fun with my dad and I'm not ready to be serious with him right now. And we have to leave space for that too. But it doesn't mean that you don't ever get serious. What it means is saying, oh my goodness, that is so silly. Can you show me how you do this too? Or, there's so many ways that we can redirect that path, but it doesn't mean that we exclusively separate them. And one of the things that we really try to do in Little Kickers is enhance those play experiences and those like high times and low times in a session where you are more rigid versus, nope, this is really, really a little bit more free range here so that children can explore and have fun. And that balance, I think, is important to that emotional security too.
I think they're really good points there. So I went to Little Kickers with my nephew. So my son, he went to a similar thing, but not Little Kickers, but my nephew did. And I used to take him a fair bit. And I think that's just really hit home with everything you were saying there, because parents or uncles or whoever, mums, dads, whoever, who take their kids at the very earliest of stages, you're talking 2 years old, you still get annoyed. And I don't know why it is. A lot of the time he'd be like, I don't want to play today, or you've got to come with me, or, I don't want to do this drill. I want to go and play with this. And I used to just be like, no, the coach has said we're doing this drill. So we're doing this drill to a 2-year-old who's in nappies, and you're like, but all they wanted was to just feel safe. They wanted, he wanted his like blanket with him, or he wanted me to walk with him. What's the problem with that? I should have I eventually did. You eventually learn it, and you're like, well, I'll just walk next to him. It's not a problem. But when you're actually listening to you and you understand what's going on in their head, it's all around that, that emotional safety. This is new to them. They don't know what this is. They don't know what they're doing. They just want someone that they love and trust near them, or something that they know is a safety blanket of some kind near them and around them. And that's like I can imagine from the super young, super young, all the way through until they get a bit older. And I think that's something that even at our age group, we forget about a lot of the time, and we have forgotten about it a lot, where we've like entered a tournament against some kids that are incredible, like a different level above us. They can be scared, right? And we forget that they're children so much, and parents and coaches often do forget that. So I think it's good to understand and for you to articulate like you have what's really ticking in their brains right now.
Yeah, I think that another piece that we leave out so much that really helps with it. So if we're thinking about like a tactic that we can use as a coach to really help them to build that emotional security and safe space, children seeing us communicate with their parent or their loved one, their family member that has taken them there, because that bridges the gap. They're my safe person. If I see you talking to my safe person, then that probably means that you're pretty safe too. And safety of people come quicker than the environment, because that's a whole nother factor, right? Like, where is this place that they just took me to? I've never been here before. But I'll trust the environment. If I trust the people that are in it. And so when they see that connection between parent, let's say, and coach, that goes a really, really long way. So even if it's just small talk, starting a session, ending a session, it helps them build safety.
This episode is brought to you by Little Kickers, the world's leading preschool football franchise. If you've ever watched your child take their first kick of a football, you'll know there's something pretty special about it. In fact, my oldest son Alfie started his football journey with Little Kickers, so this one feels close to home. For over 20 years, Little Kickers has been helping children aged 18 months to 8 years build confidence, coordination and a love for the game through fun, high-energy football classes designed specifically for young children. But here's the exciting part. If you're a parent who loves football, enjoys coaching and has thought about building something of your own, Little Kickers could be the perfect opportunity. Little Kickers is looking for passionate people across the UK to run their own franchise, with the backing of an established brand that already has over 350 territories across the UK and 25 other countries. They'll support you with the marketing, technology, curriculum and admin. You'll just need to work hard and follow the playbook in your territory. You don't need to be an ex-pro or full-time coach, just someone who loves working with children, values community and wants to turn that passion into a rewarding business. So if you've ever thought, could I do this myself? The answer might be yes. To find out more, visit littlekickersfranchising.co.uk. That's littlekickersfranchising.co.uk. Start your own football journey with Little Kickers today. I guess the older they get as well, that friendship groups outside of the team, the group, that can also help. I remember, again, with my son starting out, he started with a friend. And they had that kind of safety connection because they knew each other and they'd run around and play around with each other. And we see that now, like our boys are 9 and like going into 10. And when a new boy joins the team or joins a training session, they're totally different kids. They're shy, they're more reserved, quite, understandably. But if they've got a friend in that group, or like you said, you're chatting with their parents, it just kind of breaks down those walls very quickly and they can start being themselves again. So yeah, I totally echo what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
I also wish I'd known all this because like when I first would take him, when he would, like he would not want to let go and I couldn't get him to sort of get onto the pitch, and he'd like that frustration that you've seen from every single parent where they're trying to get their kid on the pitch and they're just getting like the way you sort of distilled it was like to an adult we perceive danger as in like a physical threat, like you're going to get hurt, etc., whereas they're perceiving danger as in not feeling safe. I just think knowing that would like help so many people in that situation where they're getting annoyed with their kid because they're like, I've literally seen you like run and bounce around and run into a wall and ride a bike and like go crazy, but you won't step onto this pitch. Why? You picked up a knife out of the dishwasher earlier. Why will you not walk onto this? And just knowing that, but the thing is, it's so useful knowing this stuff because in the moment as an adult, I am incredibly impatient and I really, really struggle with it. And, but like having these little nuggets as a coach or as a parent is really helpful. And I think one thing that you do get as a coach is you're worrying about the group. So you're worrying about, you've got, especially young children, it's like herding cats. They're all running around and you're thinking about what the parents are thinking. Oh my God, they're looking at this as chaos. I haven't got control. Nobody's learning anything. How do you, like as a coach, move away from worrying about that so much and actually just letting the children explore their curiosity, explore the social environment and football, and not get too worked up yourself and worrying about that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here. I mean, one, I think like abandoning the idea of like, I have to manage a group. You are managing a group and you are trying to deliver a program, right? So it's not that you're just throwing that idea out the window of like, I don't have to worry about that. You do have to worry about that. But I think it's looking at it in ways of like risky behaviors. Like if a child is having risky behaviors, you have to address that. But if a child, like I've watched so many sessions where it's okay, everyone sit down on your spot. And I know for older children, they don't have like a spot that they sit on, but it's like, okay, come and join a huddle or what have you. And we spend so much time getting them to sit appropriately that we waste the entire session on management of that rather than the group. Whereas if I just say, all right, everyone move to a spot where you can hear me because I'm going to give you the directions for the next activity. I don't care how they're sitting. They could be standing. They could be kneeling. I don't care. Nothing is a problem. They're going to be physically comfortable and they're going to be able to listen better if I allow them to be themselves. So even if it's that someone straight off to the other side of the room, if that's where they can hear me, okay, they're not harming anybody. They're not harming themselves and they're not disrupting the group necessarily. So it's fine. If that's how they need to hear instructions, that's fine. And as they grow, then they self-regulate more and more and more, and you have less and less and less of that. But I think that it's important to recognize that also, like, the more prepared we are for our sessions as coaches, the better off we're going to be because we've set up the environment in a way where we know what transitions are going to look like. We know when we're going to be moving and things like that. So it makes us able to pivot a little bit better with children's behaviors because we know what's coming next. If I'm playing it fast and loose the whole time, it's really hard for me to reset when I do have to address things.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. This whole time when you were talking, you're talking about that very first thing you're talking about around the billions of changes that are happening in a child's brain at that earlier stage. Is there a kind of a specific age or milestone from a developmental point of view, either cognitive or physical, that we should be aware of at a certain age, especially when it relates to sports, that coaches should be aware of when children are making these changes because they are hitting a certain development milestone? Is there anything that we should be aware of?
I wouldn't say there's like a magical spot. What I would say is there's socially and emotionally, there's usually a pivot around age 7, loosely, and every child's a little different. But around age 7, they'll start to really understand abstractions. So you can give them like things to imagine or think about or understand where they don't have to have physical things to look at or feel or manipulate. And so that usually will help, like, if a coach does a lot of auditory direction, they'll start to be a little bit more responsive to that at age 7 or above. Under age 7, we're really talking in these concrete terms where you need to do with them, show examples, let them manipulate. That's why play is so important. That's why manipulation of materials is so important, why discovery is so important. So that 7 age from a social and emotional standpoint and a cognitive standpoint becomes pretty pivotal. Beyond that, I think one of the things that I would talk to coaches about most frequently is this idea of ability versus developmental expectations in general, regardless of the domain. When I say domain, I mean like cognitive, social, physical, emotional, language. But this idea of like, what can they do versus what I should expect of them. And oftentimes we'll see children that they can do something that's pretty extraordinary, like they have an ability, but they don't have the emotional fitness to work within how to make that work effectively, or the ability to say when it's most appropriate to use that skill. So even if they can do it, it doesn't mean they can do it effectively. Also, in a group setting, we need to translate that to coaches as just because they can do something doesn't mean we should expect it of them. Great examples of this are like you show a skill to a child, a football skill, they're doing, scissors or something like that. And you're like, wow, they can do that. And then you practice it a bunch, they drill it. And then you get into a play situation, a match play situation. And the coach is like, do the scissors. And nobody's doing it. And it's because that application of knowledge, when it's appropriate to use it, and where and how and in what circumstance, that hasn't been automated yet because it's a cognitive skill. It's not the physicality of it. So it's really important to know what your developmental milestones look like for children at every age, because then you can say, okay, this is appropriate for them to know. I can expect this of them, or I have to teach it if they don't know it, versus, wow, that's really out of their realm. They shouldn't be able to do that yet. Just because they can doesn't mean we should be practicing it, if that makes sense.
Well, I'd apply that to like everyday experiences, like where you watch a child, you think they've got it. Like I was showing my son how to strike through the ball. He's doing it over and over again. He's doing it. And then next day we come back, and then everything that I've told him and we've learned, that's gone. That's out the window. And then I'm sitting there thinking, I don't understand why this is happening. Why is this happening? We work, you know how to do it. But then like now, when you explain that and how the brain works and where they're developed, it just makes so much more sense. I honestly think parents and coaches would benefit so much from understanding where a child is at in their development, what is going on physiologically, hormonally, emotionally, all this stuff would explain so much. Because at the time, I just find it's odd that like adults judge. The problem is adults judge kids as if they were an adult, and that is why they get frustrated. But when you know all this information, it really does bring a real clarity to the situation. The next step is just being me to be able to remember that when I'm getting stressed out. If I could remember all this stuff, then maybe I
It's
wouldn't be.
it's an art.
I was just going to add one more thing onto the end of that, because that's so true, is that you've seen them do it once, twice, whatever, and then you just expect them to do it all the time. But you also have seen other children. And Laura, you said something that really hit home with me around, everyone's different and they develop at different ages, different stages, different parts. And you're like, okay, so it's very difficult for coaches and especially for parents to say, I see my kid do that and I see that kid do it all the time in matches. So why isn't my kid doing that in a match? And that's something that, again, parents should really, really hone in on this and understand why they're probably not doing that. Like for ages and still to this day, my son refuses to use his right foot. He literally refuses to use it. But I've seen him kick the ball with his right. He's got quite a good right foot, but he just doesn't want to use it in matches for whatever reason, most likely confidence. But again, as he's getting older, he will start to use it more because he's starting to develop and he's starting to grow confidence and he's getting that emotional safety a lot of the time as well. So I think, understanding what's going on in their brain at the different age groups is so important to parents. And I just don't think it certainly wasn't for Ben and I discussed ever when we were starting out coaching our kids or just taking them to little kickers and the like. So it's really important to know this type of stuff.
Yeah, I think it helps just conceptualize everything for everybody. And I mean, I'll tell you, as a parent, I'm so thankful, honestly, that I chose this as a career path for myself and an area of study, because I will say that I don't get so frustrated with my children. I mean, don't get me wrong, they have their moments. But I don't get as frustrated when I can compartmentalize, like, this is developmentally appropriate. I should be expecting this. It's annoying as all get out, but I should be expecting this, versus I know you know better. We have a rule about this. We've done this a million times, and now you're not doing it because of whatever the reason might be. And I can differentiate that a lot easier knowing what I know about development. So I think that's, if I can recommend one thing to anybody who's working with young children, it's understand developmentally what is appropriate and expected at those ages. And you will save yourself so much stress and anxiety because you'll level set yourself on what is appropriate and what's not.
So just to summarize, Laura, for any coaches listening to this first episode, how should they view sort of free play and just, when kids first enter the sport, their first contact with the sport, and it's not so structured, it's a little chaotic? What should they understand what is happening in summary to children? And then why should coaches not get too worked, just let it happen? How are they learning and what's affecting their brain?
So I think one is make sure that you're giving a time for all of it in a session. Like if you're doing a 30-minute session or a 60-minute session, depending on the age of the child, giving them space for all of it. Some things should be more challenging than others. Some things should be more playful than others. One thing that we haven't really talked about yet is like using thematic elements appropriately in sessions, like building storylines for things. Children learn through story as well. We read a lot of stories from day one, where that has gotten through to every parent pretty much, of like the value of reading to your child from a young age, right? Like some people read to their pregnant bellies because we've heard that message time and time again, that it helps them with their language development, it helps them with their cognitive abilities, all of that. Well, same thing's true. We can integrate some of those things in, and we can have story-based things. So, if we're going to go to outer space, for instance, we can build a whole storyline about how we get there, and we have to build a rocket ship, and then we've got to board the rocket ship, and we've got to do this, and we've got to send them on missions. That language can be really playful and fun for children, but it also helps re-engage them back in what you're trying to do, and it allows you to push in and out of challenge with them. So if something is hard, you make it part of the mission. And if something's more playful, it's something that we do while we're on the mission, right? So those are some things that I think really can help coaches just understand that children can't be eyes on the prize the entire time. It just, their brains can't operate that way, and they need little breaks. They need playthings. They need to feel like they get decision-making time. Do you want to do this or do you want to do this? That's also another really valuable thing to learn, is it doesn't have to be one way.
Well, Laura, you have done my job, because you have teased the next 3 episodes more perfectly than I could have done. We're going to jump into more of that, learn more about it. Huge thanks to Laura for a brilliant opening episode. Make sure you join us next week for episode 2, where we're shifting to focus on play in action. We'll be breaking down how to design activities that build skills, confidence, and curiosity right there on the pitch. And if you enjoyed today's show, please share the pod with anyone you think would benefit. We will see you next week.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. And if you want to check out our previous episodes, just click here.